Recently, it seems like all of my closest friends have been experimenting with new diets: ketogenic, paleo, and alkaline. People aren't the only ones that want to eat healthier for their brains and bodies. The raw diet for dogs is becoming more popular. I'm fascinated by the raw dog food trend as a dog lover who wants the best for his best buddy. If you think about it, kibble is a strange method to feed your dog. Yes, it's convenient, but I can't help but question whether this homogeneous, crunchy food with unknown origins is actually the greatest thing for my dog to eat. Hi, this is Russell from Happy Lovely Dogs. In this video I want to talk about the pros and cons of a raw food diet. What exactly is the raw diet, and should you feed my dog a raw food diet? What exactly is raw dog food? A raw food for dogs consists of raw meaty bones, organs, and, typically, some vegetables. The BARF diet, which stands for Bones and Raw Food or Biologically Appropriate Raw Food, is the first raw diet. It was proposed in 1993 by veterinarian Dr. Ian Billinghurst as a way to imitate what dogs would consume before domestication. Aside from the BARF format, there are many alternative raw food models, such as the prey model. This version of the raw diet does not contain as many fruits and vegetables. There is a heated discussion in the raw dog food community over whether and how much fruits and vegetables to feed your dog. I'm generally suspicious of diets that claim to turn back the clock on evolution, whether in humans or dogs. Dogs and humans have evolved dramatically in the thousands of years since then, and their diets may have evolved as well. However, kibble is a relatively new innovation, around the 1930s, and commercial dog food did not exist until the 1800s. So we're not attempting to turn back the clock thousands of years with this diet. Sled dogs and racing greyhounds ate raw diets before it was fashionable, those husky hipsters, thus the raw argument has some merit. Before we continue on how to feed your dog a raw diet, hit the like button so the other dog owners also can view this video. How to feed your dog a raw diet. A raw diet may be fed to your dog in a number of ways. With the rising popularity of raw diets comes a lot of new options. Homemade raw diet. Homemade raw diets are a lot of effort unless you have a method down. It's harder to make a quick and balanced diet of bones, meat, vegetables, organs, fruits, eggs, and vitamins or herbs. Many veterinarians warn against making raw meals owing to the danger of contamination and nutritional imbalance. Opponents of raw diets cite parasites and contagion as big risks. Frozen raw diet. Frozen raw diets are mushy logs of dog food. They're soft, smelly, and easily cut into easy serving sizes. I don't have much freezer space, so I avoid frozen raw diets. That said, I often use them as treats to roll up into meatballs for dogs. They're a convenient, fast option. Freeze-dried raw diet. Freeze-dried or dehydrated raw diets often have few ingredients with sexy, superfood-like ingredient lists. Think free-range turkey, sweet potato, kale, kelp, and spirulina. Scoop out the food, rehydrate it with water, and serve it up. Since I'm so darn busy, this is the option that I've gravitated towards. Barley gets some of these freeze-dried options frozen in Kongs daily. There are a myriad of raw feeding options available in any form you'd like. Many of these small, US-based companies will even deliver raw doggy diets right to your door. However, if you're planning on feeding just raw and nothing else, be sure to consult with your vet about dietary completeness. This is mandatory and not optional. You need to work with your vet to make sure your dog is getting the nutrients they need. Depending on your dog, certain supplements may be essential for your canine's health, so talk to your vet. What's wrong with my kibble? Many commercial dog kibbles are simply nasty. They're full of fillers like corn, preservatives, and other inexpensive substances. The lengthy, slow-heating procedure that sanitizes kibble and makes it safe also drains kibble of most of its nutrients and moisture for even high-grade kibble. That said, many dogs thrive on kibble. My 14-year-old Labrador hasn't been sick a day in her life, has a beautiful coat, and is still playing fetch. Some humans are able to live it into their 90s when they eat junk and smoke every day, so it's no wonder that many dogs thrive on whatever we give them. While there are certainly excellent kibbles on the market, raw does have a certain magic connected with it. I've heard hundreds of tales of dogs who had medical or behavioral problems vanish apparently overnight following the transition from kibble to raw food. As just one example, read about Sarah Stremming's dog Kelso. Kelso had severe stomach problems until she converted to a raw diet. Sarah's second dog had a dull coat and struggled to maintain weight, until she began eating a raw diet. The dog world is full of miraculous tales like this. It's very much simply anecdata. But when you mix enough tales of miraculous tales, it's worth paying attention. Despite the majority of outright awful kibble, there's plenty of good stuff to our preoccupation with what our dogs eat hasn't gone ignored. With the overall increasing emphasis on health and well-being for both people and dogs, some kibble producers are now wising up and starting to produce better, more nutritious kibble. Increasingly more businesses are trying to come up with great, easy-to-feed, relatively cheap dog food that's gently baked, to preserve moisture and nutrients, and produced with high-quality ingredients and no grains. If you're feeding one of these meals, you're probably doing pretty well. There may be absolutely nothing wrong with your kibble. It's worth considering giving your dog a healthier meal with healthy components and high moisture content even if you don't want to attempt raw food. Sometimes a change in nutrition, regardless if this means going raw or moving to a higher quality kibble, may result in significant improvement for your dog. The advantages and disadvantages of going raw will focus specifically on the pros and cons of a home-prepared raw diet. If you're purchasing a pre-made, frozen or freeze-dried, raw diet, the calculus may shift somewhat. Advantages of going raw first: you know exactly what's in your dog's food. For the conscientious owner, it's hard to beat a homemade diet for your dogs. You can source out free-range organic venison if you'd like. There's no guesswork as far as what you're feeding your dog. This is great for dogs with allergies, medical issues affected by diet, food intolerances, or owners who have ethical concerns about different food types. Second, it's easy to customize. Since you're making your own food, it's easy to make adjustments to your dog's nutritional intake. This means that if you know what you're doing, you could increase different macronutrients to prepare for a sporting event or winter. However, this level of knowledge about canine nutrition soars above most of our heads. Third, there are physical and mental benefits. This is the biggest draw of the raw diet for many. It's hard to ignore the tales of cancer cures, shiny coats, cured aggression, improved eyesight, and shy dogs made confident. If you believe everything you've ever read about raw diets, you'd think that feeding your dog raw meat was the canine equivalent of the fountain of youth. As I said before, I take these miracle stories with a grain of salt, but there sure are a lot of these inspiring tales. It's best to use a combination of training, diet change, and environmental setup to deal with physical or behavioral patterns. Relying on a simple diet change as a silver bullet is naive. Disadvantages of going raw. First, it's expensive. Feeding your dog raw food is expensive. Even with frozen or freeze-dried options, it was hard to keep up feeding barley raw food. I'd personally rather spend my money on herding lessons and midday dog walks. If you've got an excellent network of farmers, hunters, and/or butchers, it's possible to make raw comparable to kibble in price, but even then, it's nowhere near as convenient. It's hard to admit, but we all have to decide what the time and financial limitations for our pets are. That balance of cost, energy, and benefit will fall differently for everyone. Second, there's a significant risk of contagion. Raw meat contains bacteria and parasites. I'm talking about salmonella, listeria, and more. That harmful bacteria is a big concern if you or anyone around you is very young, very old, or otherwise immunocompromised. That said, you can also find E. coli in plenty of processed dog foods, and you likely prepare and handle raw meat at home on a weekly basis. My best friend has late-stage Lyme disease, and I frequently work with young, unvaccinated puppies. The risk of contagion is a big concern for me. This statement from the American Veterinary Medicine Association links to several scientific articles about contagion in raw food and why these dangers are no joke. Third, it's easy to end up with a nutritional imbalance. Nutritional imbalance is a potential concern for any homemade dog food, including homemade raw diets. You're not a canine nutritionist, and therefore anything that you procure at home is likely not as balanced as something that's being produced commercially. Getting enough calcium or phosphorus is challenging with a raw diet. Even if you've got that right, it's difficult to ensure that the nutrients will be absorbed properly. Biochemistry is hard. Manufactured dog foods have problems, but they are obligated by law to hit certain nutritional benchmarks that ensure your dog is getting everything he needs to function and thrive. If you're going to get into DIY dog food, you'll need to do tons of learning and become a part-time scientist to do it right. If you do raw or homemade food wrong, you can easily do more damage to your dog than any good. Fourth, preparing the food is time-consuming. All this preparation, disinfecting, and research on proper raw diet feeding is majorly time-consuming. If you don't have time to become a part-time canine nutritionist and clean your dog's space like a commercial kitchen, home-prepared raw food might not be for you. The research alone could be a full-time job, and the jury is still out on many key details. Fifth, you need tons of freezer space. For those of us who live in tiny apartments, freezer space is a hot commodity. I live in a 700 square foot apartment with a girlfriend, a border collie, and 2 parrots. There's really nowhere for me to put a chest freezer or other freezer space. From what I can tell, one of the best ways to make raw food more affordable is sourcing huge quantities of meat from butchers or hunters in single purchases. That means you've got to be able to prep and store all of that meat somewhere. If you've got a basement with 2 chest freezers, like my father, who both farms and hunts in northern Wisconsin, this might not be an issue after all. But for many folks, the freezer space required to do raw, affordable and effectively isn't easy to come by. Is going raw worth it? Probably not for most owners, but ultimately, it depends. Raw diets may offer some advantages, but the cost, money, time, and contagion risk is extremely high. Switching to raw may be worth a try if your dog has specific medical problems, but for most households, a prepared, commercial dog food diet will be a superior option. Even if conventional dog food is causing your dog's stomach problems, we'd advise try a homemade prepared diet before committing to raw. There are also lots of additional adjustments you can make to assist a dog with digestive problems. Just switching to a new type of kibble or protein source may be the cure your dog needs. Or, instead of going to raw, try adding wet food or supplements like fish oil to your dog's kibble. Adjustments like these are far more practical for most owners, and may offer many of the same advantages typically associated with a raw diet. Ultimately, we all want what is best for our dogs. But real dedication to a healthy canine isn't simply about plunging headlong into every dog food craze. Instead, owners need to try various methods and evaluate the outcomes, much like a scientist would do in a research project. It's a lot of effort, but if you're contemplating raw in the first place, you don't likely believe that your dog deserves the best. Finding out the best for your dog takes time, research, and quite a bit of work. Raw alternatives. Other ways to improve your dog's diet. You may obtain many of the advantages that raw offers without the time, expense, and infection concerns. For example, glossy coats typically result from high-fat diets. You may either eat a high-fat diet or utilize supplements to achieve a similar effect. Some additional methods to possibly obtain the advantages of raw, like extremely glossy coats and decreased stomach problems, include dietary supplements. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of different supplement options out there. Having an idea of what your goal is with the supplements is key. You'll want different supplements if your goal is a shinier coat versus increased joint strength versus firmer stool for Fido. As with everything, talk to a pet health professional about your dog's needs and goals before diving into this diet change for your dog. Canned wet food. Feeding more wet food can increase the moisture content of your food. Be sure to look out for any canned foods that have high BPAs, as this is a big concern. Increased moisture content means that your dog won't need so much extra water. Whole food supplements. Mixing in carrots, peas, eggs, coconut oil, lean ground beef, chicken breast, or venison is a great way to spice up your dog's diet. These fresh ingredients give lots of nutrients that kibble might miss, plus they're around your home. I mix in healthy table scraps with many of Barley's meals. Home-cooked diets. Home-cooked diets are another option, though they run into many of the same nutritional balance and time-consuming issues as a raw diet. Home-cooked diets dramatically reduce the risk of contagion, but are fairly labor and knowledge-intensive. If you're worried about your dog getting enough of this nutrient or that mineral, talk to a specialist about supplements to consider. What do I feed my dog, Barley? To be perfectly honest, I asked to write this piece because I wanted to learn more about what to feed my dog. I've ended up more confused than when I started. So, for now, Barley gets a varied diet. He's fed a mixture of high-quality kibbles, like Stella and Chewy's Instinct, Taste of the Wild, and Pure Vita, for his main meal. I buy small bags of kibble and change the brand of each bag. I mix in some salmon oil or sardines and a few bits of produce if we're not using his kibble as a training reward. He eats some carrots and apples and other produce scraps. He gets 2 to 3 frozen Kongs per day that are filled with either Costco's brand of wet dog food or a dehydrated raw food. I hide some chewy things around the house every day for him to find. He gets antlers, pig's ears, and bully sticks. And every so often, he gets a big meaty raw bone to gnaw on. That's just what works for us. I don't have the time, money, or freezer space to make barley homemade meals. I don't like dehydrated raw foods or the raw food rolls because I like feeding his kibble out of puzzle toys and his training rewards. While I'm at work, I leave him with the Kongs and other chewies hidden around the house. What works for you? Tell us about your feeding system, especially if you feed some or all raw food. That's all I want to talk about pros and cons of a raw food diet for dogs. I recommend you to check the best training for dogs in the description box below. I'm Russell from Happy Lovely Dogs. See you on the next video.